Well, here we are for the very last of these episodes of what I call my digital crush. For those of you who have seen this enough times, you'll be glad to know this is the last one I'm doing, so you don't have to hear this story. For those who have never seen this before, let me tell you this story. We got an episode of Friends here playing, and this was one that basically Ross and his friends were making some comments about celebrities they like to sleep with. One of which is Isabella Rossellini, who shows up at the coffee shop, and so he was like, hey, yeah, she's on my list of top 5 celebrities I would sleep with. And it's a very funny episode. Now, my sister's a big Friends fan, and we got talking about, okay, well, who are the celebrities you would want to sleep with? And that, over time, morphed into, what video game characters do you feel that way about? And I've been listing my top 5 because it's important that I be able to talk about some of the games that those characters are in. But without revealing what the fascination is, it's been kind of hard to hold off on that. So, I've been talking about each of these 5, and now we have come to the final spot, top of the charts, number 1. I think it's time that I reveal the very last member of my Digital Crush list. Number 1. Chun-li. It is time. Time, finally, to discuss lady number 1, Chun-li. Having appeared recently in Ready Player One in multiple scenes, having now been released as DLC for the Handler in Monster Hunter World, it is a sign that now is the time for me to discuss my fascination with Chun-li. Where did it begin? I don't know where it's going to end, but let's get into my serious infatuation with the number 1 lady of fighting games and truly one of the iconic characters in the video game landscape, Chun-li. Now, Chun-li has been showing up in my videos off and on for years, and I've always danced around the subject because she's the top of the charts for me as far as women in video games, and because she's a central character to Street Fighter, and Street Fighter has such a huge community and it's a huge section of the gaming landscape, I've kind of hinted at Street Fighter off and on here and there and mentioned, like in a video response to T-Rex Space Station, I really need to talk about Street Fighter in the future. This is what's been holding me back. Chun-li is the reason I play Street Fighter, and I haven't really been able to discuss that game very much because without going into the focus I have for that character, I can't really discuss the game yet. And from now on, I'm going to start talking about Street Fighter, and specifically Chun-li. A lot of Chun-li is coming your way. So where this all began for me was in the arcades in the early 90s. I mentioned in the person number 2 on my list, Poison, I was really enjoying Final Fight. And my buddy and I would go to the same arcade and play that a lot. And not long later, this other new game seemed to completely change the landscape. Everybody was talking about this new Street Fighter 2 game. It was everywhere. And I thought, okay, well, let's try this out. It looks kind of interesting. And a very important thing happened to me the first time I walked up to one of these machines. I talked about this with person number 3, Felicia. There I was, looking at the character select screen. I've put in my money. Who do I want to play? And of course, all the kids around me were Ryu or Ken. A friend of mine would play Dalzim. I don't think I ever really saw anybody else being selected on that screen, but I remember looking at these characters and thinking, okay, who am I going to choose? Who's the best of these 8 characters? And for some reason, a little voice in the back of my head said, what do you want to bet the girl is actually really good. Just, reverse psychology. What do you want to bet the developers have said nobody's going to choose the girl? I mean, it's, the arcade scene of the 90s and it's aimed at teenage boys. What do you want to bet they have made the girl character super good and nobody's going to choose her because she's a girl? And I just thought, okay, yeah, I'll give that a whirl. Out of the blue, I'm just going to try the girl character and see what happens. And my first couple of games, like most people playing Street Fighter for the very first time, I got my ass handed to me by some kid standing next to me. But within a couple of sessions, after a couple of quarters were plunked down, I then discovered if I randomly bashed at the keys for the various controls, punching and kicking, suddenly Chun-Li goes into this whirl of lightning legs and can decimate the competition. And I thought, hey, I was right. She is awesome. I like this character. I'm going to stick with Chun-Li. And that has been the history for me ever since. I even have a t-shirt that says, I always play as Chun-Li. So thank goodness I chose Chun-Li. Much like years later when I walked up to the first Darkstalkers cabinet and I chose Felicia, that reverse psychology of why don't you go for the character that you don't think anybody else is going to choose, it really paid off. I was able to fend for myself pretty well against other Street Fighter players for at least a little while. I should point out, in case anybody's watching this thinking, oh, he's a Street Fighter champion. No, not even close. I am about as good at Street Fighter as I am with chess. I can maybe manage for a little while, but I am by no means in any kind of competition level or anything like that. I just really enjoy it. Other fighting games like Darkstalkers have come and gone. I've dabbled with Mortal Kombat, I've tried King of Fighters, I've tried Soul Calibur. But none of them have Chun-Li, and so I'm not really interested. I am strictly playing Street Fighter because of Chun-Li. I didn't realize it at the time, but the fact that I liked Chun-Li as a character to play in the game was to resonate with a lot of people over the years. I mean, Street Fighter went through different iterations. They added Cammy White as another girl character you can try. And she also became very significant. A lot of people like Cammy. But for me, it was always Chun-Li, and she has actually elevated into this superstar status in the gaming landscape. I mean, I rarely go to any event or walk past a mural of video game characters without seeing Chun-Li represented up there. Almost by accident, this character that I happened to select at random then became a paragon of the video game landscape. And as I mentioned before, she was in Ready Player One. They actually stuck her in a couple of scenes there. She's in the background in Wreck-It Ralph. She's a touchstone, a member of the pantheon of classic video game characters. She is to video games what Princess Leia is to science fiction films. Chun-Li is to video games what Wonder Woman is to comic books. She's an icon. Now, most of us will recognize Chun-Li from her outfit. Her very distinctive blue-colored gown called a chi pao. That's the right way to pronounce that word, by the way. It's blue in the game and every game since, but in the character select screen, you might notice it's actually an orangish color. Apparently that was going to be the color originally for her outfit, and I'm not sure why they switched it to blue. I think at the last minute, Capcom decided, wait a minute, all these other characters are wearing either white or red or some variation of that. And if we have another orangish character, that's going to kind of blend. Why don't we go somewhere in a different direction? Why don't we choose blue? Yeah, there we go. Chun-Li's wearing blue now, and it's stuck. And I hope somebody who knows Chinese culture better than myself, I think blue chi paos are kind of uncommon, so it's odd that they went with that color choice. Something else that Chun-Li is instantly recognizable for are the oxhorn bun hairstyle that she sports. Now, this is kind of unusual. I think they put it on her so that when she was in the character select screen, you would instantly recognize what part of the world she was from. Street Fighter's characters were all from different corners of the earth, and I think to make it very clear she's from China, they stuck the oxtails on her head. But it's interesting that usually only little girls in China have the oxtail sort of hairstyle going on. And if you dig into the lore for Chun-Li's background, the reason she still wears them and the reason she wears her chi pao are actually to pay honor to her late mother, who died when Chun-Li was just a little girl. There's one only photograph of Chun-Li's mother and she's still wearing a chi pao. So it looks as though this is why Chun-Li sports such a childlike look. But it is also interesting that whenever Chun-Li is successful in being triumphant in a match, she does giggle like a little girl as well. So there is this childlike element to Chun-Li's character. And since we're dissecting Chun-Li's look, we have to talk about those thighs now. She's kind of become famous for the thunder thighs, and don't get me wrong, I love that about her. I think that is her calling card, and it makes her gorgeous. But I have a feeling it wasn't always intended that Chun-Li have these enormous thighs. If you look at the original sprite work, the first version of Chun-Li's legs were fairly normal in size. Whenever she is standing facing the camera, her thighs are slightly large, but I think due to the limitation of the pixels, if they had reduced her legs by just 1 pixel depth, she might have looked a little bit scrawny. So I think Capcom erred on the side of caution and said, okay, in order to differentiate that this is a female figure, we've got to give her shapely legs, so we're going to go with that 1 extra layer of pixels. And somehow, that combined with her various lightning leg attacks, then it became synonymous that, yeah, Chun-Li has giant legs. Again, not a problem for me. I love her legs. I think by the time Street Fighter 4 rolled around, they got a little crazy with how big those thighs could get. And I remember an interview with Yoshinori Ono where somebody said, just how big are Chun-Li's thighs gonna get? And his reply was, the simple answer to that is, I am looking for the perfect thigh to rest my head on, so whatever size would work as a nice pillow. To be slightly serious for a moment, this is something I really found admirable about Chun-Li's character. I'll never forget my sister telling me that once her hairdresser went to a Halloween party dressed up as Chun-Li. The reason is that she is a woman that has fairly large thighs herself, and this worked out to be perfect for the costume. So combine that with the fact that Chun-Li is an Asian woman, and in an industry famous for female video game characters really sexing it up, much like most of the other women in my list, I must confess, Chun-Li is actually very admirable because she's buttoned down. There's a sexiness there, but it's not like it's all out there on display. She's a seriously dressed character, and I really find that admirable. She's also a little bit difficult to nail down as far as her personality. I mentioned earlier she is slightly childlike if she wins a match and she does her little giggle. Also, she's got a very grim backstory. Her father was killed by M. Bison, and she's generally depicted in any of the anime or comic books as being a very serious character with a serious motivation. She wants revenge for her father's death. And if you look at the way she's depicted at some of the beginnings of some of the fight sequences that she's involved in, like in Marvel vs. Capcom, she's got a fierce look on her face. She's ready to kill. By the way, on the subject of that victory pose, some people used to wonder in the early days, what is she saying? Because it's not very clear when she does the little peace sign. That's actually a Japanese phrase, yatta, which means success or victory. And it's not a peace sign that she's holding up. In Japan, What we refer to as the peace sign is actually V for victory. But it's strange that a Chinese character is saying a Japanese phrase. On the one hand, well, it's an early game from Capcom, so they were just going for Japanese language stuff. But if you want to dig into the lore for Chun-Li herself, she is apparently an Interpol officer and can speak multiple languages, so it makes sense. They did add later on, sometimes Chun-Li would say xie xie, which is thank you.
You win. All right, that's cool. You win. All right.
In the mid-90s, Chun-Li went through a little bit of a costume change. In the Street Fighter Alpha series, she actually swapped out her Chi Pao for this more athletic unitard kind of a thing, and it was quite a nice look. I liked it, but I must confess I didn't play Street Fighter Alpha. First of all, by this point, in Canada at least, arcades were on their way out. Despite the raging success of the Street Fighter titles, Alpha just didn't really make its way here, except for on home consoles, and I never played any of the Street Fighter games on home consoles until many years later, and that was due to one controller button I'll go into in a future video. So I didn't really see much of Chun-Li in her unitard, nor did I follow her in Street Fighter 3 Third Strike. It wasn't until Street Fighter 4 came along that Chun-Li resurrected in my memory of, oh yeah, that fighting character that I loved so much. Oh, maybe I'll pick up Street Fighter 4. Let's see what her look is like now. I touched upon it earlier. Yeah, her thighs were really huge. But you know what? I'm okay with the thighs. That's fine. I was horrified when I saw her hands. What have they done to her hands? They're like big meat cleaver hook, like something you would see on a wrestler. What on earth? There's actually a Seinfeld episode where he jokes about how he's dating a girl with man hands. That's what they did to my Chun-Li. They gave her these giant man hands, these big football player mitts. And I was like, no, that is not my Chun-Li. What the heck did you people do? I actually resisted playing Street Fighter 4 for the longest time. I was dismayed at its huge success. I thought, really? Can we patch out the hands? And it wasn't just the hands, also her shoulders were kind of burly. Again, her Chi Pao has puffy sleeves, which is fine, but something in the animation of Chun-Li depicted in Street Fighter 4, I was not on board. I just thought, no, this is a terrible look. I don't like this. And then I got Street Fighter Cross Tekken. Thankfully, they added Poison, so with Chun-Li and Poison together in one game, yeah, I was getting Street Fighter Cross Tekken. And although it's the same model for Chun-Li, I did find that it seemed a little bit more feminine as far as the gestures and movements. Her shoulder didn't seem quite so burly. I was able to put up with what they did with Chun-Li come Street Fighter Cross Tekken. And then luckily, Street Fighter V came out and it all got A-OK in my books. Yes, 1,000 times yes. They have made up for Street Fighter 4 by improving Street Fighter V's appearance of Chun-Li. I am way happier with how she ended up looking in this game. Bought it immediately. Unfortunately, the honeymoon wasn't going to last long. Marvel vs. Capcom Infinite was announced, and as a good indication of just how important Chun-Li is in the gaming community, some of the earliest trailers for that game showed the model they were going to use for her in that game, and there was outrage in the community. There were so many videos, so many forum posts, so many petitions, people saying, Capcom, fix Chun-Li's face. What have you done to this woman? I think that's a really strong indication of her cachet in the gaming world. So many people were really, really annoyed at Capcom for messing up Chun-Li's face. So I'm rather glad that I'm part of that army. A couple of events occurred that are not to do with video games at all, and yet are indications of the power that Chun-Li has as a character. Nicki Minaj just recently released a song called Chun-Li, and on the cover she's got the hair buns, like she's obviously referencing our Street Fighter heroine, but the song has nothing to do with Chun-Li as a character. She's just a line in the song. It's kind of unusual, but I'm glad to see it. And a funny thing happened a little while ago when a fitness model called Natasha Enchinosa, not sure how to pronounce her last name, she posted some pictures of herself in a dress, and this woman really works out. She has an amazing physique. And in the dress, she kind of looks a little bit like Chun-Li's newest look in Street Fighter V. There's this black dress you can purchase from DLC, and everybody said to Natasha, "Hey, you look just like Chun-Li in those pictures." And apparently Natasha was like, "Who's Chun-Li?" And the next thing you know, she changed her Twitter handle to The Real Chun-Li. That was pretty cool. I actually follow her on Twitter just for that one reason. If anybody ever wants to make another film, like a third attempt at a Chun-Li on screen, Natasha would probably be a good choice because she's certainly got those thighs. But I cannot round out my tribute to Chun-Li without mentioning Evo moment number 37. Even though this is technically a failure for Chun-Li and a loss, but it's one of the most iconic and important moments in video gaming history, and Chun-Li is central to the whole story. For people who don't know, EVO is where the best players of the world get together and compete for huge prizes and the title of Best Street Fighter Player in the World. And in 2004, two of the best in the world, Daigo Umehara and Justin Wong, played off against each other. Daigo chose Ken, and Justin chose Chun-Li. Now, Justin was actually conservatively playing and annoying Umehara by actually making him slowly wear away Umehara's health bar. And with only about 30 seconds left in the game, it looked as though Justin Wong was going to win, but he decided at the last minute to do a special attack, I guess to wipe out Ken entirely. Ken was down to the last pixel of life bar left. So Justin Wong then leapt into a Hoyakusen, which is a multi-hit string of kicks. And instead of avoiding it, Umehara decided to parry the kicks. Now, if you don't understand Street Fighter, this is very hard to explain. But when Chun-Li comes flying in with a Hoyakusen, there are a whole pile of legs all flying at you rapidly. And what Umehara did is he actually hit the parry button multiple times in incredible sequence and actually blocked every single one of Chun-Li's kicks. And then he went in with a final kick of Chun-Li in midair and he actually defeated her. The crowd went wild. It is one of the most important moments in Street Fighter history and in video games in general. I have to show the clip.
Rare footage of Daigo actually angry. Justin's turtle style. Overcome Rao. Now on the verge of putting Daigo down 1-0. Unbelievable. Daigo with a full parry.
Yes, Chun-li, absolutely my #1 digital crush. I have loved this woman for decades, and she is probably my favorite video game character of all time. What an amazing woman she is, what an amazing history she's got. And I think actually I need to make a couple of confessions of stuff that I've been hiding on my previous videos. First of all, do you remember when I talked about those Christmas sweaters and I couldn't show one of them? I'm going to do that right now. So, as you may recall, when I was doing these Christmas sweaters, and I love this Atari one, I was holding up this blue one without actually being able to show it. And at the time I said, I can't show this one yet. Why is that? Well, because this is the Chun-li sweater. And without describing this whole video, having the Chun-li sweater would seem to be a little bit odd or hard to explain. There's actually a better one than this of Ken and Ryu shooting like a fireball or a Hadouken, which is making the Christmas star. And I really like the design of that, but being a Chun-li fan, I was just like, no, if I'm going to get one of these Street Fighter sweaters for Christmas, I'm getting the one with Chun-li. It's also got Sagat on there, and admittedly it doesn't work quite as well for a design, but I just decided, no, I'm Team Chun-li. If I ever see those guys with the Ken and Ryu ones, I'm wearing this with pride. In fact, let's put it on. What's that doing under there? I also like the color. It's got a nice, I like the navy blue on it, and blue is Chun-li's color, so to me, that really works. So there we go. There's my other Christmas sweater that I couldn't really show off till now. And secondly, I'm going to talk about this a little bit further in depth because this video is getting kind of long, but also when I talked about the Sega Saturn emulator that I had running on my phone, at the final shot for Marvel Superheroes for the Sega Saturn, I left the loading screen stuck, and I did say that there's something rather significant on this page. Those who are really into Chun-li lore might actually recognize a name that's on this screen. And if you don't worry about it. I'm going to do a separate video about it. But when I was alluding to there's something significant here that's going to come up in a future video, it's because of Chun-li. Again, I'll describe it a little bit better in the future. But for now, all I have to say is I love Chun-li. She is my #1. And this entire series of digital crushes has been leading to this moment so that I can now talk a lot about Street Fighter and Chun-li specifically. Yeah, there we go. #1 of the charts, Chun-li. Without a doubt. Hands down. Huge history for me. She's iconic. She's the queen of video game icons, in my opinion. I mean, what more can I say than I've just been blathering about for the last little while? Yeah, I want to talk more about Street Fighter, and I really can't until I've talked about Chun-li. So, now that we've done this, now that we've done all of the digital crushes and my weird fascination with her has been revealed, I can start talking about it all. That's great. I feel a giant weight off my shoulders. Big, burly shoulders. So, I hope you enjoyed this. I hope this didn't weird out too many new viewers. I also wanted to discuss, if anybody has been really enjoying this kind of tribute to all these ladies of gaming, there's actually a whole YouTube channel devoted to this. A guy that I discovered when I was actually researching Chun-li stuff. His channel is called Digi Valentine. I'll put a link down below. He actually pays these tributes to various ladies in various games, and he talks about their personality, their history, what the women behind the outfits are like, and then he discusses them and their history. And it's a great channel. So Digi Valentine, check him out. I'll put a link below. And in the meantime, But I'm done with my digital crush. Might do an honorable mention sometime if I feel like it, but in the meantime, I hope you've enjoyed this. I certainly have. And until next time, we'll see you down the rabbit hole.